The Galactic Crisis. Xyloth, Supreme Commander of the Eldritch Alliance, stood on the bridge of his flagship and surveyed the holographic star map with dismay. Red icons denoting Zorgan forces swarmed across system after system, engulfing the galaxy sector by sector. The war had raged for decades now. What began as a border skirmish had escalated into a full-scale galactic onslaught. The Zorgans, a race of reptilian conquerors, had long sought to expand their territory. Leveraging their advanced weaponry and ruthless tactics, they had swept across the stars, crushing all who stood in their way. In desperation, the free peoples of the galaxy had banded together, forming the Eldritch Alliance to resist the Zorgan advance. Dozens of starfaring species had joined: the wise and enigmatic Hylothians, the proud warrior clans of Asmodean Prime, the brilliant scientists of the Novolon Collective. Together they had mounted a valiant defense. But it hadn't been enough. "Status report," Xyloth barked, his voice echoing through the hushed bridge. His first officer, a tall Kylothian named Talon, responded promptly. "The Zorgans have taken the Helios cluster. Our forces are in full retreat. Casualties are high." Xyloth clenched his fists, his blue skin flushing navy with barely contained anger and frustration. The Helios cluster had been one of their strongest fortifications, a linchpin in their defensive line. Its fall signaled a dire turn. "What of our counterattack at Sandul?" Xyloth asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. Talon shook his head solemnly. "Repelled, Commander. The Zorgans were ready for us. Our fleet was decimated." A heavy silence descended over the bridge, the weight of their grim predicament sinking in. They were losing this war. The Zorgans were too strong, their forces too vast. At this rate, it was only a matter of time before the last bastions of resistance fell, and the galaxy was plunged into a new age of tyranny and oppression under reptilian rule. "Commander, we cannot win this," Talon said quietly, voicing the thought that haunted them all. "The Zorgans are too powerful. We've thrown everything we have at them, but it's not enough. We need a miracle." Xyloth gazed out at the stars, wrestling with a desperate idea that had been growing in his mind. An impossible hope, a last-ditch gamble. Most would call it madness, but in these dire times, was there any other choice? He turned to face his bridge crew, resolve hardening in his amber eyes. "There is one last option, one final hope for us all." The officers looked back at him, a mix of confusion, fear, and fragile hope on their faces. "The Deathworlders," Xyloth said. "We must summon the humans." A ripple of shock and disbelief ran through the bridge. The humans were a legend, a terrifying myth whispered of in the darkest corners of the galaxy. Few had ever seen them, fewer still had lived to tell of it. The Deathworlders. In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, whispers of the Deathworlders echoed through the stars. They were spoken of in hushed tones, tales of awe and terror passed down through generations. The humans, it was said, came from a harsh and unforgiving planet, a world that would crush lesser species. Earth, the human homeworld, was a place of extremes. Scorching deserts and frozen tundras, towering mountains and abyssal depths, lush jungles and barren wastelands. The planet itself seemed to wage war against its inhabitants, hurling storms, quakes, and all manner of natural disaster against them. Yet somehow, in defiance of all odds, the humans had risen to dominance. Shaped by the crucible of their merciless homeworld, the humans had grown strong, resilient, and ingenious. They had mastered their planet, bending its fury to their will, and then turned their gaze to the stars. With the same tenacity and audacity that had allowed them to flourish on Earth, they had burst onto the galactic stage. The first species to encounter humanity had been the Keldnar, a race of proud warriors. The meeting had not gone well. Mistaking the human explorers for easy prey, the Keldnar had attacked, only to find their ships torn asunder by human weapons they couldn't even comprehend. In a matter of hours, the Keldnar fleet lay in ruin, and the legend of the Deathworlders was born. Tales spread of the humans' fearsome prowess in battle, their indomitable spirit, and their strange, almost reckless bravery in the face of danger. It was said that they did not know fear, that they laughed in the face of death. Some even whispered that they couldn't be killed, that they would rise again and again, ever relentless, ever unstoppable. As the stories grew, so did the fear. Most species chose to avoid contact with the humans, to stay far away from the Deathworlders and their terrifying reputation. Only the most foolhardy or desperate would ever consider seeking them out. Xyloth, Supreme Commander of the Eldritch Alliance, was desperate. Faced with the unstoppable onslaught of the Zorgan invasion, the Eldritch Alliance teetered on the brink of annihilation. They had fought valiantly, but it wasn't enough. The Zorgans were too strong, their conquest too swift. In a matter of months, the galaxy would fall. Unless, in a last desperate gambit, Xyloth had proposed the unthinkable, to reach out to the Deathworlders, to beg the humans for aid. It was a plan born of desperation, a final, fleeting hope. Many in the Alliance opposed it, arguing that the humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable, that they were just as likely to destroy the Alliance as to save it. But Xyloth saw no other choice. With every passing day, more worlds fell to the Zorgans. If they did not act now, all would be lost. And so, with a heavy heart and a flicker of desperate hope, he had dispatched a small scout ship to the edges of human space, a plea for help, a final cry in the darkness. Now, all they could do was wait, and pray that the Deathworlders would answer. First contact. The Eldritch Alliance scout ship, the Luminous Hope, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Orion Arm, on the fringes of human space. As the swirling lights of faster-than-light travel faded from the viewports, the crew collectively held their breath, unsure of what awaited them. Captain Zarathil, a seasoned Hylothian explorer, stared out at the unfamiliar starscape with a mix of awe and apprehension. In all her travels, she had never ventured this far, never dared to approach the domain of the Deathworlders. "Sensors, what do you see?" she asked, her voice steady despite the quickening of her jewel hearts. The sensor officer, a young Asmodani named Kriv, scanned his displays, his eyes widening. "Captain, I'm picking up a massive energy signature directly ahead. It's like nothing I've ever seen." Zarathil moved to peer over Kriv's shoulder, her own eyes widening at the readings. The energy output was staggering, dwarfing anything the Eldritch Alliance could produce. As they watched, the source of the reading came into view. It was a ship, but unlike any ship Zarathil had ever encountered. It was colossal, easily dwarfing the Luminous Hope, its hull a gleaming, seamless expanse of a strange dark metal. Its shape was angular and aggressive, all sharp lines and harsh angles, as if it had been carved from the darkness of space itself. "By the stars," Zarathil breathed. "Is that a human ship?" Kriv nodded, his hands trembling slightly on the sensor controls. "It matches the descriptions from the stories. The size, the power readings. It has to be them." Zarathil swallowed hard, suddenly feeling very small and very vulnerable. The human vessel hung in space ahead of them, silent and imposing, a leviathan waiting to strike. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to turn the ship around and race back to the safety of known space. But she had a mission. The fate of the galaxy rested on this moment. Steeling herself, Zarathil turned to her communications officer. "Open a hailing frequency. Broadcast on all standard channels and languages." The comms officer nodded, his fingers dancing across his console. "Channel open, Captain." Zarathil took a deep breath, then began to speak. "This is Captain Zarathil of the Eldritch Alliance ship Luminous Hope. We come in peace, seeking the representatives of the human species. Our galaxy is in dire peril, and we humbly request your aid." She paused, licking her suddenly dry lips. "Please, you may be our only hope." The message sent, the bridge fell into a tense silence. The human ship loomed ahead of them, inscrutable and unresponsive. Seconds ticked by, each one an eternity. Then, just as Zarathil was about to repeat the message, the comms console chimed. The officer's eyes widened. "Captain, we're being hailed." "They're responding." Zarathil felt her heart leap into her throat. This was it, the moment of truth. She nodded to the comms officer. On screen. The view screen flickered, and then resolved into an image that would be seared into Zarathil's memory for the rest of her days. A human, staring back at her with piercing, intelligent eyes. The human spoke, its voice deep and commanding. "This is Admiral Grayson Winters of the Terran Exofleet. Identify yourselves and state your purpose." Zarathil swallowed hard, her fate, and the fate of the galaxy, hanging on her next words. The human decision. Admiral Grayson Winters stared at the alien face on his view screen, his expression inscrutable. The bridge of the TES Valor, the flagship of the Terran Exofleet, was silent save for the soft hum of powerful machinery. Every eye was fixed on the screen on this historic moment. First contact. After centuries of expansion and exploration, humanity had finally encountered another intelligent species, and not just one, but an entire alliance of alien civilizations. "I am Captain Zarathil of the Eldritch Alliance," the alien repeated, her voice resonating with a musical quality that the translator couldn't quite capture. "We come seeking your help." Admiral Winters leaned forward, his gaze intense. "And what help do you seek, Captain Zarathil?" The alien captain began to explain, her words painting a grim picture. A ruthless species known as the Zorgans, bent on conquest and domination. A galaxy in flames, world after world falling to the Zorgan advance. The Eldritch Alliance, a final bastion of resistance, now on the brink of collapse. "We have fought with everything we have," Zarathil said, her voice tight with emotion. "But it's not enough. The Zorgans are too strong. We cannot stop them alone." Admiral Winters listened, his mind racing. This was not a decision to be made lightly. To involve humanity in a galactic war, to risk the lives of his soldiers and the security of Earth. It was not a choice he had ever expected to face. "And why come to us?" he asked. "Why seek the aid of humanity?" Zarathil's eyes met his, and in them, he saw a flicker of something he recognized all too well. Desperation and a faint glimmer of hope. "We have heard the stories," she said. "The tales of the Deathworlders, of your strength and courage. It is said that humans do not know fear, that you laugh in the face of death itself. We had nowhere else to turn. You are our last hope." Admiral Winters sat back, his jaw tight. The decision weighed heavy on him. To refuse would be to condemn the Eldritch Alliance, and perhaps the entire galaxy, to the tyranny of the Zorgans. But to agree would be to plunge humanity into a war they had not started, to risk everything they had built. He looked around the bridge, at the faces of his crew. They were the best of the best, the elite of the Terran Exofleet. He saw in their eyes the same determination, the same fierce resolve that had carried humanity to the stars. And in that moment, he knew what he had to do. He turned back to the screen, meeting Zarathil's gaze. "Captain," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "Humanity will stand with the Eldritch Alliance. We will fight." Relief and gratitude washed over Zarathil's face. "Thank you, Admiral. You have given us hope where there was none." Admiral Winters nodded, already beginning to plan, to strategize. They would need to act fast, to strike hard and decisively. The Zorgans would not be expecting them. "Return to your fleet, Captain," he said. "We'll follow right behind you." It's time the Zorgans learned what it means to awaken the Deathworlders. As the screen went dark, Admiral Winters turned to his crew. "Battle stations," he ordered, his voice ringing through the bridge. "We have a war to win." The tides of war. The galaxy burned. Across 1,000 worlds, the fires of war raged unchecked. The Zorgan advance seemed unstoppable, a relentless tide of conquest and destruction. But now, a new force had entered the fray. The Terran exofleet, the might of humanity unleashed upon the stars. Admiral Grayson Winters stood on the bridge of the TES Valor, watching the tactical displays with a keen eye. The human fleet had arrived at the front lines, a vast armada of sleek, powerful warships. Already, they had engaged the Zorgans in a series of blistering skirmishes, testing the enemy's strength and resolve. What they had found had only hardened their determination. The Zorgans were indeed formidable. Their ships were heavily armed and armored, their tactics ruthless and efficient. But they had never faced an enemy like humanity before. "Admiral, the Zorgan fleet is massing in the Cygnus sector," reported his tactical officer. "They're preparing for a major offensive." Admiral Winters nodded, his jaw set. "Then that's where we'll meet them. Full battle alert. All ships, prepare for warp jump." The Terran fleet leaped forward, crossing light years in the blink of an eye. They emerged from warp to find themselves face to face with the Zorgan Armada, a vast host of alien warships stretching as far as the eye could see. For a moment, the two fleets faced each other across the void, a silent standoff between titanic forces. Then, with a flash of energy weapons, the battle was joined. It was a furious melee, a swirling maelstrom of destruction. The Zorgans hurled themselves at the human lines, their weapons hammering at the Terran shields. But the human ships held fast, their advanced defensive technologies absorbing the worst of the barrage. And then the humans struck back. Lances of searing light leaped from the Terran ships, slicing through Zorgan hulls like a scalpel through flesh. Torpedoes, each one a miniature sun, detonated in the heart of the Zorgan formation, consuming ships in blossoming fireballs. The Zorgans reeled stunned by the ferocity of the human counterattack. They had expected to face a weakened, demoralized foe. Instead, they found themselves locked in a desperate struggle for survival. Across the battlefield, human and Zorgan ships clashed in titanic duels. The Terran vessels were swift and maneuverable, darting around their lumbering foes. The Zorgans responded with overwhelming firepower, filling the void with storms of missiles and energy beams. But for every human ship that fell, a dozen Zorgan vessels were shattered and burned. The human fleet fought with a skill and coordination that the Zorgans could not match, their every move guided by the brilliant strategic mind of Admiral Winters. Slowly, inexorably, the tide began to turn. The Zorgans, for the first time in their long history of conquest, began to give ground. Their lines wavered, then crumbled, then broke. As the Zorgan fleet fled, the Terran ships pursued, harrying their retreat. And across the galaxy, on 100 embattled worlds, the forces of the Eldritch Alliance took heart. Their desperate gamble had paid off. The Deathworlders had come, and with them, hope. But the war was far from over. The Zorgans were beaten but not broken, and they would not relinquish their grip on the galaxy easily. The greatest battles were yet to come. On the bridge of the TES Valor, Admiral Winters watched the Zorgan fleet disappear into the depths of space. He knew that this was only the beginning. But for now, in this moment of triumph, he allowed himself a small smile. The Deathworlders had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The great triumph. The war had raged for years, a titanic struggle that had engulfed the galaxy. The Zorgan Empire, once thought unstoppable, had been pushed back, system by system, world by world. The alliance of the Terran exofleet and the Eldritch Alliance had proven a formidable force, united in their determination to end the Zorgan threat once and for all. Now the end was in sight. The Zorgan homeworld, a planet of towering spires and seething industry, hung before them, a final bastion of defiance against the advancing tide of the Allied forces. Admiral Grayson Winters stood on the bridge of the TES Valor, the flagship of the Terran fleet. Around him, the ships of the Exofleet and the Eldritch Alliance hung in space, a vast armada poised for the final assault. "All ships, prepare for orbital bombardment," Admiral Winters ordered, his voice steady and resolute. target the Zorgan command centers and military installations. We end this today. The fleet moved forward, the human ships at the vanguard. Lances of energy rained down upon the Zorgan homeworld, shattering defenses and turning fortresses to rubble. The Zorgans fought back with the fury of the doomed, their weapons carving fiery paths through the void. But it was not enough. Not this time. With a final, shattering barrage, the defenses of the Zorgan homeworld crumbled. The Allied ships descended, disgorging armies of human and eldritch soldiers onto the planet's surface. The battle that followed was fierce and bloody, a desperate struggle in the streets and towers of the Zorgan capital. But step by step, block by block, the Allies advanced, and at their head, leading the charge, were the human warriors, the dreaded Deathworlders. They fought with a skill and ferocity that stunned even their eldritch allies. They were relentless, unstoppable, a force of nature unleashed. And before them, the Zorgan lines broke and shattered. In the end, it was Admiral Winters himself who accepted the surrender of the Zorgan leadership. In a shattered chamber at the heart of the Zorgan citadel, he faced the defeated warlords, his eyes hard and unforgiving. "Your reign of terror is over," he said, his voice ringing with finality. "The galaxy is free." And across 1,000 worlds, a cheer went up, a cry of victory and liberation. The long nightmare was over. The Zorgans had been defeated, their empire broken, their threat ended. In the aftermath, as the Allied forces began the long task of rebuilding and restoration, the leaders of the Eldritch Alliance sought out Admiral Winters. They looked upon him with a mix of awe and gratitude, the savior of their worlds, the champion of their cause. "We owe you a debt we can never repay," said Xyloth, the supreme commander of the Alliance. "The Deathworlders have saved us all." Admiral Winters smiled, but there was a weight to his gaze, a heaviness born of the long years of war. "We did what needed to be done," he said, "but the work is not over. There will always be threats to the peace and freedom of the galaxy, and humanity will always stand ready to meet them." And as he spoke, he knew that a new era had begun. The isolation of humanity was over. The Deathworlders had taken their place on the galactic stage, and they would never again retreat into the shadows. For better or for worse, the galaxy had changed. And at the heart of that change, leading the way into an uncertain but hopeful future, stood the indomitable spirit of humanity. The Deathworlders had come, and the stars would never be the same. The end.